Let's dial the clock back just a bit from the dissolution of Standard Oil in 1911 and look at specifically what happens in Texas. So the first discovery in East Texas was in Nacogdoches, followed by Corsicana. Corsicana was significant because they also built a refinery there. And so you can see that although I'm hardly arguing with the Supreme Court's decision in 1911, Standard Oil's monopoly was being eroded significantly by the oil discoveries in other places in the United States where they were not the dominant refiner. But the first really significant oil discovery in Texas was in 1901 at a place that's always called Spindletop. It was important for the geology, which I don't expect you to get into. It's also significant because it was the first place where they used rotary drilling as opposed to just a drill where they picked up and dropped the drill bit down. So this was rotary drilling. And you can see it was a great gusher in Texas. And this is what really set off the oil boom in Texas. For us, important in Wichita Falls in 1907, oil is discovered at Petrolia, which is about 20 miles northeast of Wichita Falls. And in 1911, Electra. In 1917 down in Ranger, but in 1918 then in Burke-Burnett. This is an actual picture of the rig spacing in Burke-Burnett, and you can see why some of the signs around Burke-Burnett call it Boomtown. Not only is this important for Wichita Falls, but it's also important because a transition takes place in the oil industry. What was happening around 1900 in terms of how homes were lit? Well, Edison and his light bulb and the electrification companies began to grow. And as the light bulb gets deployed, what do you need less of? Kerosene for illumination lamps. So the market for kerosene is beginning to decrease. But what is also happening? The automobile is beginning to take off. And so actually in 1907, when petroleum oil was discovered in Petrolia, was when the first service station was launched. So even as the market for illumination, I think I said lubricant earlier, even as the market for illumination was decreasing, the demand for gasoline is beginning to take off. 1920, Colorado City is significant because this was the first discovery in what we now call the Permian Basin. I put these other slides in here just to show you that oil was discovered all around Texas, but the biggie in 1930 in East Texas was the Black Giant. Massive oil field. You can see from the graphic that it was so important during World War II, they actually built some pipelines so that they could quickly and efficiently transport the oil from the Black Giant into the large refineries on the East Coast. So very important to supplying the United States with petroleum and all the other products during World War II. But the really significant point for the Black Giant was it triggered a call for, if you can believe this, a call by oil men for governmental intervention. This caused yet another price collapse and a demand for the government to step in. The photo of the East Texas, you see how close the wells are spaced. So I want you to pay attention to the concepts of pro-rationing and hot oil, the rise of the Railroad Commission, and the fact that this is where governmental regulation significantly enters into the American oil industry. So I'm going to pause now, and I want you to watch this section of the prize to get the story of the Black Giant. Just one other factoid, oil discovered off the coast of Texas in 1954. Let's open up our consideration from Texas to the rest of the world. Now, I want you to know the term Seven Sisters and the companies that were participants in that, in part because, again, what do you see? You see the major multinational or IOC companies that exist still to this day. But these were the Seven Sisters that developed the world of oil as it was discovered. Excuse me. So let's look at some of the places where they were discovered. In the mid-1880s, oil is discovered by Royal Dutch in Sumatra, what we now call Indonesia. Not surprisingly, the oil discoveries continue from Texas and go south. 1901 in Mexico. 1908, very important, oil is discovered in Persia, what we now know as modern-day Iran. Back in the Americas, in 1922, oil is discovered in Venezuela. Now, the Seven Sisters are doing these sorts of discoveries. Why? Because they work out an agreement with the government and they say, let us prospect for oil and we will share with you the profits. Initially, it was very unbalanced in favor of the oil companies. In other words, they might give the country 10 or 20% of the revenue from that oil discovery. Big deal in 1943, Venezuela negotiated the first cut where they got 50% of the revenue. So that was a huge trigger that they got 50%. In the mid-1950s, Iran actually got 75% of the revenue. So you can see as time went on, people wanted more and more percentage of the cut. Well, from 1922 in Venezuela, in the 1930s is where oil was discovered on what we now consider the Arabian Peninsula. In the 1950s, oil is discovered both onshore and just offshore in Africa. And then in the late 1960s, we both began to develop oil in the North Slope of Alaska and also in the North Sea. So these are where the major oil entities are taking place. Next, in the next video, we're going to transition and talk about that worldwide market for oil, and we're going to introduce OPEC. Join me for that.